All right, live. I want to say live at 5. I used to do something live at 5, but now it's live at 7 because we want to go to heaven. So we are here for the unscripted conversation that we have every 7 o'clock on Sunday. I think I didn't do last week because of a migraine, but I don't remember because it was a week ago, and who can remember a whole week ago? So I am here to have a conversation about mental health and general rules. Feel free to join in on the chat and ask mental health conversations. This is an unscripted conversation, so I don't plan out what I'm going to say ahead. I try to respond to people that log in and discuss mental health issues. So I do ask that people keep the topics to mental health. Politics, religion, and the like do come up as mental health conversations, but we try to have the focus being on mental health in those conversations. Also, when it comes to anonymity, I try not to call people out. So if I don't say your name or anything, that might be because I'm trying to keep as much confidentiality as possible, but I cannot, of course, guarantee any confidentiality. And if your YouTube username is your actual name, then it probably won't take a lot of time for people to figure out. The chats are public, so anybody can log in to the chat at any time, and they can then figure out who you are. So feel free to comment your questions in the chat, but please don't do so with things that you would want to keep private. Okay, so far we have nothing going on in the chat yet, so I'm going to just keep chatting about mental health. And sometimes it takes a little bit for people to warm up, but we'll do what we can. So I'll just keep the conversation going on the topics of mental health in the meantime. So what has been coming up with themes lately for conversations about mental health? What are people struggling with? Well, it is December 21st. And I once talked to a police officer about when it comes to Christmas incidents, because, of course, they are very frequent during the holidays, that a lot of people are really struggling. And I asked if Easter, for instance, had a similar effect, and the answer was no. So there is something very unique about Christmas time that gives us this feeling of not just like what is a holiday and what is important, but what is family, and often thinks about the family we've lost, or the things we wish were the case and were not. So giving yourself extra grace in the holidays is important. Allowing yourself to plan things ahead, think through what do you really want to do in this holiday season, what is in your control, and trying to just make sure that you focus on your goals in 2026 and beyond. Because in the end, Christmas, whether you love it or hate it, whether it's an important religious holiday or something that you get dragged at to parties that you don't really want to be at because you'd rather cuddle with a cat, whatever Christmas is for you, it is just another day. And please do not take it as a sign that your life is either meaningful or meaningless, depending on what's happening. Yep, baby Jesus and cats are the way that I like to celebrate Christmas. Baby Jesus is my favorite Jesus because he's all cute and cuddly. And with that said, just don't let yourself get too focused on Christmas as a measurement for what your life is like, because your life is not defined by this or any day. I'd be happy with my cats all day. Yeah, just cats and Christmas. What else can you ask for? I mean, I don't even really have a plan for Christmas Day, to be honest. But I definitely will cuddle with. I gotta buy Ripley some Christmas presents. I haven't even thought about that. Get her some Christmas costumes. I should get you'd hate that would make her hate Christmas all the more. All right, so keep coming with your questions about mental health conversation stuff, people. I got some people in the chat now, two of my besties. But yeah, I'll keep chatting away until they come over to our house for Christmas time. Yeah, maybe I will. Definitely, you guys have been a big part of a lot of my Christmases of late for sure, because we're family, even if we ain't blood. But yeah, and that's another thing is that, if you feel alone at Christmas, you can always volunteer and give back and do something for somebody else and then end up feeling really blessed, because it's a blessing to be a blessing to others. Should I be concerned if ChatGPT offered the mental health crisis hotline based on my comments? Yeah, a little bit. I would not say that ChatGPT is a good measurement for mental health because it has none. It is the collective unconscious. It is not as intelligent as people think it is. It's a validating machine. But so more than anything, it's probably a sign that you wanted it to say that you weren't doing well in your mental health. And I don't know about you, but have you ever been there where you're like, you kind of just want, in some ways, to be validated that it's miserable? Actually, Melissa, who just entered into the chat. I usually don't call people's name out, but she is the one who said most consoling thing she's ever heard from someone is, that sucks. Like, sometimes just having it be where someone or something in the form of chat GDP, please don't name your chat GDP, by the way. There's this woman who did these TikTok videos about her psychiatrist and end up naming her chat GDP, and she kind of cray. Not a good sign if you start to personify your chat GDP as a person. But that's like a thing. That's going to be that's going to be a diagnosis at some point. I guarantee it. But anyway, it might be you're framing it in such a way that your chat GDP is thinking what you're wanting it to say is that life really sucks right now for you and you're struggling. And that's okay, because sometimes that is what our reality is. It's okay to not be okay and to go through those processes. Artificial schizophrenia, I don't know what the diagnosis it'll probably be like something along the lines of, like, I would say, so it's like codependency, but with artificial intelligence. Um, Artificial intelligence obsessive disorder or something like that, or maybe personification obsessive disorder, because I think it's going to be people that get attached to the chat GDP and use it as their social validation. It's definitely going to become more and more of a thing. It's been something that's been happening in our culture more and more. So I grew up in the era of internet, and so while I grew up with the World Wide Web, there wasn't a lot you could do, and you had to, wait the time. And now it's just everywhere, and it's definitely sucking my attention away. But I'm so glad that I didn't grow up in the era that the internet is now, because I think it would be a lot harder to stay connected with actual people dealing with actual life and not just get sucked up into these social worlds. But here we are having a, therapy conversation online, because that's what people do more and more. So I'm not going to be an anti-technology person that's going to try to fight it. In some ways, I think that the reason we need mental health sources in this modern world is because we are not built for the modern world. I had somebody hating was hating on one of my videos, saying that, like, therapy is the reason we have such problems in the world today, and it's because of therapy, and people just need to get over their stuff. And he was like all angry and the way he wrote it, so it's obvious that he kind of needs therapy. But with that said, I was thinking about it, and it's like, no, it's kind of the opposite. It's like we live in this modern world, so to adapt to it, we really need a lot of therapeutic resources. If we lived in a much more natural world with more community, with more in nature, doing things with our hands all day, having less long-term stresses like financial burdens of like things that are due in months, we would have a lot less mental health issues. So a lot of the mental health issues we have are trying to adapt to this very artificial world already, and the world's just becoming more and more artificial. It becomes something other idolize. Yeah, it's like you can really idolize your chat GDP or anything online and social media. As the new year approaches, can you share about good mental health advice for new starts and better patterns for the new year? People can get a lot more done than they think in 5 years, but a lot less in 1 year. So, one of the things that I would say when it comes to New Year's resolutions, for instance, is focus on attainability and setting the bar very low on something that you know you're going to do. So if you put the and I do this myself, set the bar too high, and then you end up losing motivation when you can't do it here and there, and then you just stop entirely. But setting the bar really low, it's like, hey, I can at least do that. And so like there's a book called Atomic Habits, I want to say. And I didn't love the book, but there was a couple things that I liked about it. And one thing that I thought was really cool was this idea of setting the simplest form of a habit or the easiest step. So, like someone, instead of going, I'm going to go running every single morning, is I'm going to put on my running shoes in the morning before I put on my work shoes. And if I run that day, great. But if I don't, I'm going to at least put on the different pairs of shoes. And some days that's all they do. But other days they go, hey, I already put on the running shoes, might as well run a little bit. And that's way more attainable, and it's easier to stop yourself from like making an excuse, well, I can't do that today because no, it's like I can put on the shoes. I can at least keep putting on the shoes. Well, maybe I should just be thankful that ChatGPT is not a mandatory reporter. Yeah. Well, it is good sometimes to have sources and places we can go to. And if you have a clergy or a lawyer, they are also not mandatory reporters. Clergy in confession and lawyer in your if you're a client of them. There's only two non-mandatory reporters. Therapists actually are, so I'm in the gray area there. Depends on how you use me. Yes, mom is the best ideas. Yes, moms in general, but mine especially has really great ideas when it comes to mental health stuff. So in terms of moving forward, I got the t-shirt on that's thematically aligned. In terms of moving forward in 2026, I think spending New Year's Eve instead of like getting drunk and starting 2026 with a hangover, it's great to just kind of like recap what the year has meant for you, look at how far you've come, look at successes, look at failures, and then go from there of like, okay, so how would I want 2026 to be different? Now in ACT, we focus on values, not goals, because you can live your values no matter what happens. Whereas if you set your goals, it's really dependent on, things that are outside of your control. So like, for instance, if I'm like doing a race and my goal is to finish in the top 5, and then all of a sudden say I'm doing a marathon, a bunch of Kenyan guys show up. If you know anything about Kenyan runners, I'm probably not going to do very well. If they're normal Kenyan runners, they run about twice as fast as me, right? There goes my top 5, or if my knee is injured and I'm struggling, it's like, what's my value? My value is showing up and doing the best that I can on that day. And as long as I did the best that I can on that day, I've done my values well. And that's a good thing to set as a goal in 2026. I'm definitely down, Joe, to do the regular New Year's thing if I'm in town, which I right now I'm not positive whether I will be, but I think I will be. And so yes, that would be a fun thing to do for 2025 and saying goodbye to it as we say hello to 2026. Hello, hello. I don't know why you say goodbye. I say hello. How do you know what your values are? So that is a great question. One of my favorite exercises that it's a fun exercise to discover your values is the heroes list. And this one, especially for people that are really creative and into a bunch of different like sci-fi books, comic books, video games, and different things like that, can be even more fun. And it's called the hero list assignment, where I have people write down all of their heroes, whether historical, fictional, in their life. So they could be their mom is their hero. Of course, my mom is my hero. My dad, if he was on the chat too, maybe, but he's not on the chat right now, so he's not my hero. I'm just kidding. But it's like you write down all of your heroes, and then what attracts you about that thing, what inspires you, what's the thing that really draws you to that person. When you start to look at the patterns, your values start to emerge. And what's interesting is it's not just generic values. Sure, there's going to be some that are pretty universal because we as human beings have common value systems, but you're going to have more specifics show up, right? Like, for instance, the value of, this is an easy one, but the value of candor, right? Someone who speaks their mind, and the value of a peacemaker or somebody that has a lot of empathy are going to be contrary to each other. So those are going to be incongruent, which, by the way, if your values have a lot of incongruencies, that is something to pay attention to and to work through, because there's probably different parts of you that are at conflict with each other. And it's good to kind of reflect on, why are my values in congruity? And why are they not aligned with each other? Why are they self-contradicting? But in general, what you end up finding is that your values will start to emerge when you look at the stories and the characters that most inspire you. So like, my hero list had a lot of people that sacrificed for others, that were helpers. My hero list had a lot of people that were resilient, that were misunderstood. So my values are about, really, honestly, the core of my value. So here's another way that you can look at your values too. Another value exercises. What would you want a friend to say about you behind your back? If you overheard a friend talking behind your back, what would be the most encouraging thing that they said? Or a little bit of a darker idea, but if you died, what would you want said at your funeral? And I thought about that. And mine, for instance, just to give you an example, is if somebody said about me that knowing me helped them be a better version of themselves, or knowing me gave them the courage to be who they were designed to be. Knowing me helped them to be healed and whole so they could be truly themselves. Like, I gave people permission to be themselves. That would be one of the most, if not the most inspiring thing that somebody could say about me. So that says a lot about what my values are. And that's probably my one of my highest values. Nothing is better for a man to eat and drink and enjoy his work. I have also seen that this is from the hand of God. Okay, yeah, definitely. It's good to enjoy his life. Going back to the Ecclesiastes, that guy always wants to go to the everything is meaningless book. Is it healthy for someone to have different values than their spouse does? I mean, it depends on like what we're talking about. So like, you want very different perspectives generally. So you know how they say birds of a feather flock together and opposites attract, and it's like, how can they both be true? Well, they are. So, because it just kind of depends on what we're talking about. Like, an extroverted and introvert partner do very well together. So if one person is way more social and another person is like way more reserved, those can be really good partners. If one person is way more of a spender and the other person is more of a saver, that usually can create conflict in a relationship, but doesn't have to. It can actually be a mutual strength. One person is very soulful, reflective of the past, thinking about consequences of the future. The other person, very mindful, could be a good partnership. On the other hand, there's incompatibilities with partnerships. So I had a friend growing up that, like, her dad was an atheist and her mom was a Buddhist, I want to say. Maybe her mom was a Christian and she became Buddhist. Her mom was a Christian and her dad was an atheist. And for her, that was a real big issue. I'm not saying that nobody can make that work with that co-parenting situation, but for them, it was a huge issue because she felt like, even though her dad didn't say these words, it was like her dad thought her mom was a liar for believing in God. So, like, big values like that can definitely become an issue. And obviously, like, there's some practical things. Like, if one person, wants to go out and party and the other person wants to get up at 5 a.m. and work out, it's like, we got different lifestyles. I guess it's more lifestyles than values. So I guess it would just depend on what kind of values we're talking about. I wouldn't necessarily need a partner that their biggest drive in life is to help other people be the best version of themselves, but I would need her to be very respectful and motivated to help me make that a thing. So I guess if you're mutually supportive of each other's values, then it can be okay if you have different ways of living those values out. Does that answer your question? Feel free to keep those chat questions coming. Don't mind if we've got a little backlog of chat questions too, and I'll just get to them as I can. Okay, good. Did answer the question. All right. So, yeah, the values. Another way to think about your values. Okay, what was I talking about? Yeah, I already said the eulogy list. And you could actually write down a fantasy eulogy list, and that might help you get your values. I like having articulate values, and if you can even boil it down to a phrase or a vision statement or mission statement. Speaking of couples, actually, though, I will say that a really good couples therapy exercise is creating a common value list. So actually going through each as a couple together, your mission statement and your vision statement for your relationship as a couple. So what am I saying? I'm not saying like something that's just a generically positive thing to do, because it's not about you as a couple. What would be your direction of what you're trying to achieve in the relationship, right? So if you're like, oh, to help other people, it's like, that's a really bad focus for a relationship. It's a fine thing to have as a value in your life, but that relationship has to be defined by the two of you. What is your mission and focus in this season for you as a couple? If the love of money or resources is the root of all evil, could the lack of money and resources be the root of all despair? Yeah, this guy used to say money isn't important, it's just rates up there with oxygen. So if the root of all evil, if the lack of money be the root of all despair. So there's definitely a scarcity mindset when we feel like we don't have enough, that produces the worst human behavior. I mean, and I've used this metaphor maybe too much, but I'll never forget the feeling of pushing my brother's head under the water when I was drowning, when I was like, what was I, 8, 10 years old? I don't really remember how old I was, but it wasn't a thought. It just happened. But it was like afterwards traumatizing to think about how my brother, who jumped in to save me, I could have drowned just to get another breath. But in that fight or flight moment, it was like, it felt like I had no choice. And so when we have that scarcity mindset, we can justify really terrible things. And so what I would say is get yourself out of that scarcity mindset, get yourself away from the situation. What I mean is, like, you could be like, but I can't get myself away from the situation. What I'm saying is get yourself away from the fast thinking that's reactive. So into that slow thinking where you realize, as long as you're not in immediate danger, you can process through, and you don't have no resources. I mean, in America, there's not a lot of people dying of starvation. So we don't have no resources. We aren't truly stuck. Speaking of which, adjusting to multiple changes and feeling stuck advice. Um, yeah, so ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, is all about not getting stuck. And that's in turn mentally, and talk about psychological flexibility. So with one thing I'd say is, if you're adjusting to multiple changes, you're not fully stuck because your things are changing. So there's at least hope there of something, because things are moving. You're not entirely in cement. But when it comes to, well, since we're speaking on values, I mean, there's so many ways to apply that. But when it comes to ACT, it's open, aware, and engaged. Open to what the reality is, not as I would have it, but as it is, right? What I'm open to, the scenarios that are presented to me. I'm aware of what matters. I'm aware of what's happening, and I'm engaged in the things that matter most to me. Is really key things to not be stuck. And I can answer more questions or be more specific on that if you give me more um, of what you're talking about. So if enduring chaos or persevering through despair is learned in childhood, then could a scarcity mindset be subconsciously cultivated? Absolutely. In fact, that's what happens. So like the scarcity mindset, and there's a lot of things. It's not always trauma. Like I think it's so easy to talk about trauma that like therapists go to trauma because it's such just an easy thing to point to. But we can be really affected by culture. Like, so for instance, I grew up in, we were just talking about a very sports driven culture. And there's a lot of things about that that I loved. Grit was a very big value in a sports driven culture. But there's things that I hated about it, like scarcity. So in a sports competition, by its very nature, there are only so many people that are going to get the medals. It wasn't all participation. So it's like you got to beat up somebody else. And if you do better than them, you're going to win. But if you do worse, you're going to lose. And then you're a loser. Right. And that wasn't like said. It wasn't the philosophy of my coach or my dad, who was the same person. But it subconsciously gets cultivated in a scarcity mindset, a culture of scarcity mindset. So you got to think about, what is my cultural influences there? Because the reality is life isn't scarcity. Life, there's much more room for the top. In fact, people that make their job helping other people succeed in life tend to actually do better, as long as they avoid the doormat pit hole. How to manage conflicting values you talked about, or more so if you are trying to make decisions and at least short term, it's not possible to maintain all of your values and you have to decide. So you definitely should have like a priority of values list. Like, it's really good to be like, okay, this is my number one value. And then these are the values that go under that, because they're often going to be at conflict. And if you have a really good way of articulating your number one value, then it's a lot easier to not break those values, to try to like justify them, because you're like, I have to, because I have to financially survive or something like that. Like, everybody's got a mortgage to pay. And then it's like, it goes back to the whole look, I'm not trying to minimize homelessness or the devastation it is and the insecurity is, but having worked with the homeless, having them have cell phones and social lives and food on their table or plates, it's like we live in a plentiful time period. We are not in the season of desperation and despair like many people have been in throughout most of human history. So like we don't have as much excuse to break from our values as we necessarily think that we do. But I would go through and process that. Like look at your values and then apply them to your question, right? Of like what your options are. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Let me know if it does. I guess I'm having a hard time moving forward since things are so different than what has been normal and routine. Yeah, people don't like changes, obviously. As much as we say we want to be spontaneous, that's like if I can control it and choose when. The Office had Ryan, I think, one time say, "Lead me, but lead me where I want to be led." Right? Lead me when I want you to and how I want you to. And the reality is, life is a way of throwing us the curve. So give yourself time to learn it, and approaching a moment that you do feel like you didn't ask for it and it was stuck as a therapeutic exercise can be very helpful. So basically saying to myself, okay, this isn't the ideal circumstance, but I can use it to focus on building my mental health kung fu. So, what are the things that I can work on to try to be more mentally healthy through this situation that I wouldn't have asked for? And like even small things can be a good example of that. So, like, this is an easy one, but like, so it wasn't like the biggest deal, but I ordered wings for lunch. And I realized that doing it on an app, because I could get a deal on the app, I ordered it accidentally on the wrong restaurant. So it was the same name, but a different location. Showed up at the one that was right by my house, and then had them notify me that it's like 15 minutes away on the other side of town. So I had to drive all the way over there, and then I had to drive back. And I literally told myself, okay, time to use this as a therapeutic exercise to see if I can just enjoy the ride and have fun. So I played music, I danced along the way, and I had a great time. So that definitely helped me stay in a positive mindset, and things like that can be huge. Working on what I call your mental health kung fu. So admitting that I am powerless over my cultivation of misery, scarcity mindset, and that I alone can't manage is the first step to recovery from the learned culture. Yeah. Yeah. So like, okay, awareness, right? I draw into the light the fact that I have a scarcity mindset. Okay. And so like this is where it's like the first step to recovery for so many things feels like the worst step. It feels like the absolute wrong thing to do. Like if you're struggling, feeling stuck, okay, going with the other person who's talking about feeling stuck, um, acknowledging what you're really afraid of and talking about that can be huge, right? Like okay, so I'm bouncing around a lot, but like insecurities, like for example, even the word insecurity, so many people don't like using, right? Because it makes them feel less than. But going right at it and talking about, yes, this is my insecurity, and like maybe understanding the influences of it can be helpful. But acknowledging it and saying, okay, I have this natural reaction of scarcity. Okay, great. So now that I know it, like it can help knowing where it comes from, but ultimately then it's like how can I adjust, right? What is the core principle of that? And so I want to understand the engine, right, of scarcity. So what is it? It is a stewardship mentality run amok, right, at its core. So it's the I need to be diligent. That's a good thing. But I'm going to do it with such a scarcity mindset that I end up sabotaging myself. That's a bad thing. So it's like, okay, how can I take that scarcity mindset, draw it into the light, address the fear, and then focus on the healthy part, not the hurtful part? What is the due diligence that I can do without all of the fear that's attached to it? I don't know if that makes sense. I recently went to the victims panel they do for DUIs. Do you feel that's the similar to scared straight thing or different, and why? So I actually think that I might get a little heat here. I think MAD, Mothers Against Driving, and other organizations similar have really done a disservice to recovery, because I get it. Post-traumatic growth, they went through a traumatic thing. They wanted to have a purpose, so they pushed to have severe penalties, thinking it was going to do good, and it makes a lot of sense on the surface. But yeah, I think a lot of times those things do more harm than good, because the psychology of this thing are backwards. Like this is a thing. People will get a DUI and then they will very frequently get another DUI very quickly, because they're so stressed about the consequences of the first DUI. And when they're stressed, they tend to drink alcohol. So then they drink more alcohol because they're more stressed. And it's the same thing of what happened with cigarette warnings. So like they put worse and worse cigarette warnings on cigarette labels. They found the really gross cigarette labels that they tried to scare people away from smoking. People actually end up smoking more. And so when they ask people, like, didn't you feel bad about smoking? Oh yeah, I felt horrible. But when I'm stressed out, I usually smoke to make myself feel better. So every time I look at it, I got stressed out, and then I'd have another cigarette. And then I'd feel good for a little bit. And then I'd look at it, I'd stressed out, and I'd have another cigarette. Right. So understanding the psychological brain of somebody in substance abuse disorder shows you that that is not a good tactic. It is like scared straight. You cannot punish people into better behavior. Doesn't really work. It needs to be positive regard. True or false, despair is essential for hope to have meaning. You can't appreciate hope without experience its antithesis. Well, relative in general, like, right, like hills and valleys, like, are completely relative, right? So it's like my friend who passed away, Floyd, I used to say, I've been so down it feels like up for me. But it's like literally, if you live below sea level and then you walk to sea level, it's going to be like, oh, I'm up on a mountain, right? Even though technically it might not be anything compared to a high mountain. So this is also why we're really bad at judging how we're doing and where we are in our mental health or life. And we really should take snapshots of like what's going on in our mental health that are like 3 months at least from each other. So, day by day, we don't really know how we're doing. It's only when we look 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years to get a better idea. And often, if we look back, okay, where was I 5 years ago? Where was I 10 years ago? We go, okay, I'm headed in the right direction. I might be feeling down from where I was. So, the core of what you're asking about, I think, with despair and hope is accurate. I also will think that there's a second hope, though. There's the first hope, which is just the naive hope of like you're a child and everything's going to go well, and then you get crushed. And the second hope takes courage, but also it's safer, right? So like, I don't talk about this a lot, but like when you have trust issues and you're learning to trust again and you're going the right direction, you're focusing on building community after having your trust repaired or destroyed, right? You're going to look with now discernment. And so you're going to have a deeper form and a healthier form, a wiser form of trust on the other side of it. Despair is the overwhelming force of meaninglessness that makes life difficult, but also provides the stark backdrop against which true hope can emerge and be valued. Yeah, absolutely. Very poetically said. And like, it's like there's a self improvement course that no one would sign up for. And my life has definitely been on that track. And there's a lot of people that I know whose life has been on that track, right? Where they didn't necessarily sign up for life having happened what it has happened. And I can't say that at the end of that, of any of those seasons or a life lived in this way, you go, oh man, I'm so glad I had all those hard knocks. But you get so good at dealing with those stuff. And it definitely does. It's like I'm so at this point convinced that happiness happens between the ears, that the mental kung fu, I don't think I've completely mastered it yet, but if you look at my life, so it's about to be 2026. So if you look at definitely like really 7 years, yeah, 7 years, the last 7 years of my life on a circumstantial relation or circumstantial level is terrible. The things that have happened in the last 7 years, but as those terrible things have happened, I have more and more learned how to fight the mental health kung fu. I've learned more and more about the tools of mental health, how to process. And if you knew me 7 years ago, I was so worried all the time. I was struggling all the time. I was depressed, not all the time, but a lot of the time. So I struggled with depression. I struggled with worry. I struggled with anxiety. I was stressed out because I couldn't be with me. And now I'm so much healthier. And it was like actually from my life falling apart that I learned those skills because I focus on mental health kung fu. The boy named Sue, I'm not sure if it's exactly a good representation of the principles that I'm talking about, um, although it is about building resiliency. So, like having circumstances that creates character because you have to, well, I guess if you're just talking about the self improvement course that no one would sign up for, yeah, be a boy named Sue, especially in the 90s when everyone called everyone gay. Like it was like the biggest insult in the world, terrible time. Anyway, living with me was a crucible of mental health kung fu. Yeah, well, we definitely went through some dark times together during the COVID days, and we still danced, we still laughed, we still found light there, and that's where we turned our lives around. I think I thrive better in chaos because that's what I'm used to. So I got to be honest with you on that one. That's a red flag sign. That's a cope that's turned into stuckness. So our brains get used to any circumstances that we over adapt to, and if you feel more adapted to chaos, that's a cope, and it's like good that your brain could cope because it needed to, but that's a cope that we want to put on extinction. So we really don't want to go, I can thrive in chaos. That's a limiting belief. And the better to change that belief system to, I can be safe in stability and comfortable. And I'm learning how to do that, the better. I don't think we thrive in it, but I think we tend to seek it out. Well, so that's the problem is if the story that I tell about myself is I thrive in chaos, I will seek it out even subconsciously. So if in my heart I think chaos works well for me, I'm going to create chaos and feel like I'm the victim of it. Chaos is a parameter often construed only when enough variables are not calculated. What? I don't know if he's saying what to that comment or something I said, But well, on the chaos order, when we're talking about psychology, and one of the questions I love to ask people is like, when it comes to your mental health and thinking of yourself as a 10 or a 1, what would you say is the healthiest number? And if you say 10 or 1, you've got a problem. Because it's not actually thinking of yourself as 10 would be great. That's actually narcissism. That's egoism, right? When it comes to order, if you're thinking on the extreme order side of things, that's not healthy either. You're trying to control everything. That's not good. Thrive in chaos. That's not good. Mental health often is somewhere in the balance. And each person is different, but you know, not everybody will have the same, but everyone should have some form of balance between chaos and order. If chaos is present, God's sovereign hand hasn't been given its due time. Well, people create chaos everywhere they go, right? That's what I'm trying to do, is to be more orderly. Um, on 1 to 10, I'm pi. This is just a circular logical statement. That's circular logic there. Pun intended. Yeah, that would be literally a fairly low number. I think that would probably be too low, but I mean, it depends on how you quantify it, right? So, um, if you say 5 is the average person, you could argue that 5 would be a mentally healthy thing. I'm average, it's like could be better, could be worse. I tend to think people that are healthy in today's society probably around 7 or 8 in the ratings, but I mean, it's more about what they say in the detail than the number they give. But if they give a 10 or a 1, it's definitely not a good sign. If less is more, then I'm doing great. Yeah. Um, so it's judging yourself as you ought and having awareness. There's going to be things in our life that we're 10s on, well, or 9s at least. There's going to be things that we're 1s on for sure. And seeing what those are, and seeing that we still have value, because every human being does, in those is a huge key to mental health. So going back to the chaos order thing, there's actually a thing called disgust intolerance that I think is psychologically very interesting, but doesn't get talked about a lot. And I'm going to do the stereotypical thing and use Hitler as an example because it's fun. But like Hitler had a very low disgust intolerance. So other ways of doing things, other cultures, were literally were disgusting to him. Like he would feel sick to his stomach when he thought about the way people lived their lives. That was different from his German traditions. And so there's usually a trauma response. Sometimes actually being in a chaotic environment can be where people react to order. So you can, like, the coping to chaos can show up in either form. It can show up with, I thrive in chaos. I am chaos. Chaos has nothing on me, to the, I'm going to make everything in order and I'm going to make sure it's aligned, and then I'm going to find everything disgusting. And it's not necessarily a conscious decision, but this is a subconscious reaction. And so whether we're a hoarder, hey, thrive in chaos, or a obsessive compulsive disorder individual, right? We are reacting to the same trauma often. And what we want to do is we want to get to the emotional root of that thing. And what's really fun is, now there's of course ways to treat the symptoms that are effective, but often when you get to the emotional root of that issue, then the cope goes away. So for my dear friend who's adapted to the chaotic environment, I mean, that's partly like starting to make decisions to put yourself in less chaos will be helpful, and realize that while you're making those decisions, it'll probably feel like they're not good decisions. So you're just aware, being aware that you're going to be pulled towards chaos so that you can keep the story alive that you're thriving in chaos is a natural desire. And there are choices that you can make to have less chaos in your life. And if you give yourself time to adapt to those changes, you're going to end up finding yourself happier in the long run. So the same as I did a R&R video a while ago called The Boring Problem, where I talked about this when it shows up in romantic relationships. So there's a lot of people that have been in a lot of chaotic romantic relationships, and a healthy relationship feels boring to them. So amidst the chaos, we should remember to spite any blame or shame we feel from. Yeah, if we are more than conquerors, absolutely. So yeah, don't take it on as your identity, which is kind of why I'm not trying to hammer on this person who's saying that they thrive in chaos, but like when we start to have it be part of our values and identity, accepting the chaos, that's not a great sign. So like romantic relationships, you know, people will find it boring where they're with healthy people, and there's no way around that other than kind of like, one, drawing it into your awareness, and then slowly allowing that to change. So allowing yourself to reprocess and realize that this is healthy. And even though there's a part of me that is driving on wanting it to be this chaotic fight, I don't have to. I can slow down. I can balance it out, right? I'm safe. This is healthy. This is good. Those kind of self-soothing things can be really helpful in that process. Be aware of the gravitation. Yeah, the gravitation of your life towards chaos without condemnation. Yeah, so no, not judging yourself, not beating yourself up, admitting powerlessness and unmanageability is the first step towards freedom. Yeah, so it's like everything, acceptance, right? Yeah, acceptance commitment therapy, right? So like we accept that I'm pulled towards chaos, aware that we adapted that that pull towards chaos based on circumstances that were outside of our control, and then commit to being okay in stability and calmness. And so we have to put ourselves in environments of stability and calmness, and then allow ourselves to rewire in those things. I have been trying to give myself grace because I know it's a huge adjustment. Yeah, absolutely. And it might take a long time. Like there's no, like everybody is different, and there's no way that I can say how long any of these battles are going to be when it comes to therapeutic battles. But I will say that there's nothing that with the right consistent work, I haven't seen people continue to progress. And maybe at a certain point there's diminishing returns, but I think anybody can get to the point where it's no longer negatively affecting their life. And if you remember from another week where I did Unscripted, if you're my faithful listener, then you'll know that diagnosis is only really supposed to be applied when it's maladaptive. So, in other words, when it's negatively affecting your life, you have a diagnosis. When it's no longer negative affecting your life, it's not a diagnosis anymore. So, on that side, depression, anxiety are all temporary. What's bigger than the adjustment is now your awareness of it. Yeah. And so that's huge. So knowing that you may or may not be somebody who's avoidant, may or may not be somebody who has overly coped and adjusted to chaos in a way that was necessary at the time, but is now creating more chaos in your life. And you're sometimes making decisions that's pulling you towards that, especially if you may or may not have a tendency to be codependent or enabling in any way. All of these things can be things that you're aware of without judging yourself. And like I used this metaphor before, but I just think it applies so well. it's the whole thing about like if you're learning to target practice and you're grouping all your shots here, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because that's actually revealing your values. It's revealing who you are and where you are in the process. And we just have to tweak things a little bit to adjust it from there, from here to there. And then all of a sudden you start hitting bullseyes, 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 right? Because you've got a good grouping, right? And so, like, don't be upset about the fact that you've got a grouping, and don't worry about where the grouping is. It's good that you have a grouping. It's a lot harder to deal with people and mental health issues when they're like scattered all over the place, right? So their shots are schizophrenic, right? In this situation, they're like this, but in this situation, they're like that. And then when it comes to this, they're here and there, they're that. When I could go like, oh, I could write up a psychological profile for this person right here, and I can see exactly what's going on with their issues or whatever. It's like that's good. Now we just gotta get that into here, and then we can start hitting the bullseye again and again. I am your groupie. Thanks, brother. I'm yours too. That's that's what friends are for. Do 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 do. Anybody know that one? Is that now he just needs roadies. Yeah, take this show on the road. All right, with that said, we are about at time for the unscripted conversation. Thank you, everyone, for joining in on the chats and discussing our mental health together. I hope I answered everybody's questions, and we need really big tires first. Yeah, that's for sure. For the tank. And speaking of which, thanks for tuning in today. Yeah, love you guys. All right, so tune in next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. All right, love you all.